Hello friends, welcome back. First of all, tell me where in the world you're watching my video from. The message arrived on a gray Toronto afternoon that felt heavier than it should have. Rain scratched at the windows like fingernails, thin and restless, and Robert sat alone in his study watching the city dissolve into mist. Retirement had taught him the quiet language of days like this. The hum of the heater, the tick of a clock that suddenly sounded too loud, the way silence stretches when something is about to break. His phone buzzed. Not rang. Buzzed. A sharp vibration against wood that jolted through him like static. He glanced down casually at first. Then he read the words. "Dad, we need to talk now." His stomach tightened. Sarah never texted like that. Her messages were warm, rushed, full of shorthand affection. "Love you. Busy day. Call later." This was different. Clinical. Urgent. Controlled. Control meant she was trying not to panic. And suddenly, the rain sounded louder. Robert didn't answer immediately. His thumb hovered above the screen, suspended in a moment he'd imagined too many times to count. He felt a strange calm seep into his chest. Not relief, not fear exactly, but recognition. It's happening. For 2 years, that quiet expectation had lived inside him like a sealed envelope he refused to open. Ever since Marcus Bennett stepped into his daughter's life with a smile polished enough to reflect trust, Robert had known that one day something would surface. Not because he wanted to be right, but because experience had sharpened his instincts into something almost cruelly precise. His phone rang. He answered before the second vibration. "Dad." Sarah's voice was tight, the edges sanded down to keep it from shaking. She did that when she was holding tears behind her teeth. "I'm here," he said softly. A breath. Too long. "Marcus found something. Old emails. Bank statements from when Mom passed. He's asking why you've been hiding money." There it was. Not an explosion, just the quiet click of a lock turning. Robert closed his eyes. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the glass like impatient fingers. "I see," he said. "You didn't tell me," Sarah continued, and beneath her restraint was confusion. Hurt. Something fragile. "He says families don't keep secrets like that." Robert almost smiled. Not from humor, from the familiar sting of inevitability. Marcus framing himself as the voice of reason. Marcus positioning doubt like a wedge. "Sarah," Robert said gently, "I'll come over. We'll talk in person." A pause. Relief flickered in her breath. "Okay. Please hurry." The line went dead. Robert set the phone down carefully, like it might shatter if handled wrong. For a moment, he just sat there, listening to the storm and to the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. Then memory rose, uninvited and vivid. 7 years earlier, hospital light had bleached the world into sterile shades of white. Catherine's hand had been small in his, her skin already cooling, her voice thin but steady. She had never been dramatic. Even dying, she spoke with the calm authority of someone giving final instructions before a trip. "Watch over her," she whispered. "I always do," Robert said. "Not just the big things." Catherine's eyes shimmered with pain and clarity. Her heart. "She sees the good in everyone. Someone will use that." He squeezed her hand. "No one's getting past me." Her faint smile carried gratitude and worry. "Promise." "I promise." The memory dissolved, leaving Robert back in the present with rain streaking the windows like blurred tears. Marcus had entered their lives 3 years after Catherine's death, wrapped in charm so deliberate it felt rehearsed. At the engagement dinner, Robert had watched him work the room, laughing just a beat too loudly, touching shoulders like he belonged everywhere instantly. He'd ordered expensive wine without hesitation, then let the bill drift naturally toward Robert with a polite smile. Small things. Invisible things. But Robert had lived long enough to know predators didn't arrive snarling. They arrived agreeable. So he had done what love sometimes demands. He prepared quietly. He moved assets. Built walls Marcus would never see. Created structures that would hold even if Sarah never understood why they existed. He told himself it wasn't deception. It was insurance against a future he prayed would never arrive. And yet, "Dad, we need to talk now." The storm outside felt like confirmation. He stood slowly, joints protesting, mind already mapping the road ahead. He pictured Sarah, brilliant, compassionate, stubborn in the way good surgeons had to be. She'd always believed effort could fix anything. That love, if tended carefully, would bloom into safety. Marcus had counted on that. Robert grabbed his coat. The air in the hallway was cold, sharp enough to wake him fully. He locked the door and stepped into the rain. The drive to Lawrence Park blurred into reflections of red brake lights and gray sky. Wipers beat a steady rhythm, like a metronome marking the seconds before confrontation. He didn't rehearse what he'd say. He didn't need to. Truth had a way of arranging itself when it was finally called into the light. Still, beneath his calm was grief. Not for money. Never for money. For the innocence Sarah was about to lose. Every parent carries a silent wish that their child never has to learn the uglier truths of the world firsthand. But wishes don't stop gravity. So Robert had built a net instead, and now he was driving toward the moment that would test whether it held. As he turned onto Sarah's street, rain softened into a mist, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. Her house stood warm against the gray, porch light glowing, windows bright. A picture of domestic peace that suddenly felt fragile. He parked, engine ticking into silence. For a moment, he sat there. This was the threshold, the line between preparation and revelation. He thought of Catherine's journals locked away, of signatures and trusts, and quiet legal fortresses built in love, of every uneasy glance Marcus had given him, calculating, measuring, and he felt something settle inside him. Resolve. He stepped out into the cold, rain soaking into his coat, and walked to the door. When Sarah opened it, her eyes were red, her composure stretched thin. Behind her, Robert could already see papers spread across the living room like evidence waiting to be judged. The storm hadn't arrived. It had been invited in. And as Robert crossed the threshold, he understood something with absolute clarity. You can warn someone about a fire. You can even build the escape route. But eventually, they have to see the flames themselves. And the question waiting in the room was simple, brutal, unavoidable. Would love be enough to survive what truth was about to burn away? The living room smelled faintly of coffee and damp wool, the kind of scent that clung to a space where tension had been sitting too long. Papers were scattered across the glass table. Printouts, highlighted lines, financial statements fanned out like accusations. Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, posture rigid but deliberately casual, as if he were hosting a business meeting instead of a confrontation. Sarah stood near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Not defensive, containing something. Robert took it all in with one sweep of his eyes. He didn't rush. He removed his coat slowly, hung it neatly, and stepped into the room like a man entering a courtroom he'd been preparing for years. Marcus didn't stand. "Robert," he said, tone smooth, lips curled in a polite smile that didn't touch his eyes. "We've uncovered something concerning." Uncovered, as if truth were a crime scene. Robert sat opposite him. The glass table reflected all three of them, distorted shapes suspended above numbers and signatures. Sarah spoke first. Her voice was small but steady. Marcus found old emails from when Mom died. Insurance documents. Statements. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" There it was. Not accusation, but wounded confusion. The sound of trust, trying to reconcile itself with missing information. Robert folded his hands. "Because it wasn't relevant to your life," he said gently. "And because it's my estate while I'm alive." Marcus leaned forward, pouncing on the word like it was bait. "Estate," he repeated. "That's the thing. When Catherine passed, that money became family wealth. Sarah had a right to transparency." The way he said family made Robert's jaw tighten. Sarah looked between them. Her eyes flickered. Doubt, loyalty, fatigue. Too much fatigue. It hit Robert then. Not as a thought, but as a feeling. She was exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. "Sarah," Robert said softly, "how much have you been covering lately?" She blinked. "What?" "Expenses. Mortgage. Bills. Marcus's business." Marcus's smile thinned. "That's not relevant," he said quickly. "We're discussing deception." "It's absolutely relevant," Robert replied calmly. "Because this conversation isn't about my money. It's about pressure. And I want to understand how much weight you're carrying." Silence stretched. Sarah's fingers tightened around her sleeves. "Most of it," she admitted quietly. "The house. Utilities. Car lease." Robert's gaze shifted to Marcus. The man didn't flinch. Investments require sacrifice, Marcus said. Startups aren't 9-to-5 jobs. Robert nodded slowly. Which startup is this again? Marcus's jaw twitched. Fintech. Revenue. Pre-revenue. Clients. In discussion. The rhythm of the answers sounded rehearsed. Hollow. Sarah looked down. Her shoulders sagged like a truth had just pressed on them. Robert spoke carefully. Not to win, to reveal. Sweetheart, when was the last time you saw tangible progress? A contract? A prototype? Anything concrete? Marcus cut in. You've never supported this venture. You've been skeptical from day one. Robert didn't raise his voice. I've been observant from day one. That word landed heavy. Observant. Marcus's eyes sharpened. This is exactly what I mean, he said. Undermining. Poisoning her perception. Sarah's breathing changed. Subtle, but Robert caught it. The way her chest rose too quickly. The way her eyes darted, searching for equilibrium. She whispered. I just feel tired all the time. The confession hung in the air like glass. Marcus turned to her immediately, tone softening. Baby, you're a surgeon. Of course you're tired. No, she said, and the word surprised even her. It's not that. It's everything. Robert stayed still. Let her speak. When the Tesla lease showed up, she continued slowly, voice trembling. I didn't even know about it. I found the paperwork after the fact. Marcus's expression hardened for a split second, then smoothed. I told you. Client perception matters. You don't have clients, she said, barely above a whisper. The room went quiet enough to hear rain tapping faintly against the windows. Marcus's jaw flexed. I'm building toward. You're losing money, Robert said quietly. Marcus's head snapped toward him. Excuse me. I know about the trading losses, Robert continued evenly. I know about the credit inquiries. The attempted loan using Sarah's credentials. Sarah's head jerked up. What? Marcus stood now, movement sharp. You hired someone to spy on me? He demanded. I hired someone to document financial activity that involved my daughter, Robert said. Because patterns matter. Sarah's face drained of color. Marcus, her voice broke. Tell me that isn't true. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time his charm didn't reach his eyes. I was trying to create leverage, he said. For us. You used my license, she whispered. His silence was answer enough. Something inside Sarah shifted. Robert could see it. The moment illusion cracks. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet internal collapse, like a support beam giving way. She sank onto the couch, staring at the papers as if they'd suddenly rearranged into a different story. Marcus stepped toward her. Listen to me, he said urgently. Your father is manipulating this. He's always wanted to control. Stop, she said. Not loud, but absolute. He froze. I defended you, she continued, eyes glistening. Every time Dad warned me, every time something fell off, I told myself marriage meant trust. Her gaze lifted to meet his. Why didn't you tell me about the trading? Marcus hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Robert didn't feel triumph. Only sorrow. The storm outside softened, rain fading into a whisper, as if the world itself were listening. Sarah stood slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. I need you to leave, she said. Marcus blinked. You're emotional. We should leave, she repeated. The word cracked through the room. For a heartbeat, Marcus looked like he might argue. Then something colder settled in his expression, calculation retreating into survival. He grabbed his laptop, movements clipped. This isn't over, he said. Sarah didn't respond. The door slammed. Silence rushed in to fill the space he left behind. Sarah stood there, staring at the closed door, breathing like she'd just surfaced from deep water. Then her shoulders collapsed, and she folded into herself, sobbing with a raw, animal sound of someone grieving not just a person, but the version of reality they trusted. Robert crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. She clung to him like she was trying to anchor herself. I'm so stupid, she cried. No, he whispered. You're kind. And kindness isn't stupidity. She shook her head. You tried to tell me. You had to see it, he said gently. No one could hand you this truth. You had to step into it. Her sobs quieted into trembling breaths. What happens now? She asked. Robert exhaled slowly. Now, he said, we prepare. Because men like Marcus don't disappear quietly. They escalate. Sarah closed her eyes. The storm had passed outside, but inside, something far more dangerous had just begun. And as Robert held his daughter, feeling her heartbeat hammer against his chest, a single thought settled in the silence. Truth doesn't just free you. Sometimes it declares war. And the question waiting in the dark was simple. How far would Marcus go to reclaim control he believed was stolen from him? The days after Marcus left did not explode into chaos the way Robert half expected. They tightened. Silence stretched through Sarah's house like wire pulled too taut. Every sound, the refrigerator hum, the distant hiss of traffic, felt magnified. The air itself carried the aftertaste of confrontation, metallic and sharp. Sarah moved through the space like someone relearning gravity. She slept in bursts. She worked longer shifts at the hospital, returning home with shadows under her eyes that had nothing to do with surgery. When she spoke, her voice carried a brittle calm, the kind that forms when emotion is sealed behind glass. Robert stayed close without hovering. He made coffee, cooked simple dinners, sat across from her at the table while untouched food cooled between them. He didn't press. He knew grief, especially the grief of betrayal, ripened in its own time. On the third morning, the first strike came. Sarah's phone rang just after dawn. Robert saw her face change before she spoke. Her jaw tightened. Her shoulders squared instinctively, like a soldier bracing. "It's Marcus's lawyer," she said quietly. Robert nodded once. "Answer." She put on speaker. A crisp voice filled the kitchen, professional, detached, rehearsed. "Dr. Morrison, we are filing a petition for dissolution of marriage on behalf of Mr. Bennett. The filing includes a claim regarding undisclosed marital assets and financial misconduct." Sarah's chair scraped sharply against tile. "What misconduct?" she demanded. "The allegation states you concealed substantial funds originating from familial transfers, assets which should be subject to equitable division." Robert felt a slow heat rise in his chest. "He's claiming my estate?" he asked evenly. The lawyer didn't hesitate. "Sir, any financial benefit extended to the marriage may be subject to review." Sarah stared at the wall like it might explain the language being used against her. "He's saying my father's money is marital property," she said. "That is the position," the lawyer replied. Silence. Robert leaned closer to the phone. "Document everything," he said calmly. "We'll respond through counsel." The line clicked dead. Sarah stood frozen. Then she laughed. Not from humor. From disbelief, so sharp a fracture in the sound. He's trying to take your money," she whispered. "After everything." Robert rose slowly. His voice carried steel now. "He's trying to weaponize confusion," he said. "And he's counting on intimidation." Sarah sank back in her chair, hands trembling. "I didn't borrow money," she murmured. "I didn't hide anything." "I know," Robert said. "And that's why we prepared." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't needed in years. When David Thornton answered, his tone was already alert. "Robert, we're under attack," Robert said simply. David exhaled. "I was wondering when Marcus would make his move. Send me everything." Within hours, Sarah's dining table transformed into a war desk. Documents stacked in neat piles. Legal binders open like shields. David arrived in person, gray suit immaculate, eyes scanning paperwork with surgical precision. He read Marcus's filing once. Then again, a slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "This is reckless," he said. Sarah looked up. "Reckless how?" "He's alleging financial concealment without evidence," David replied. "And he's ignoring the prenuptial agreement entirely." Sarah blinked. The prenup. Robert watched realization dawn. Marcus had signed it. Enthusiastically. Confident he'd never need to challenge it. David tapped the document. "This clause explicitly waives any claim to inheritance, gifts, or trusts originating before the marriage." Ironclad. Sarah's shoulders sagged with fragile relief. "But that's not all," David continued. "Robert, may I?" Robert nodded. David opened another folder. The investigator's report. Sarah's breath caught as pages turned. Transaction histories, flagged credit applications, documented losses. Each sheet stripped Marcus's narrative bare. "This establishes a pattern," David said quietly. "Financial exploitation, attempted fraud, reckless debt creation in your name." Sarah stared at the evidence like it was a mirror she didn't want to recognize. "He really did this," she whispered. "Yes," Robert said gently. And now he's desperate. David closed the folder with deliberate finality. "We'll counterclaim," he said, hard and publicly. "Marcus wants leverage. We'll give him exposure." The hearing came fast. Family court moved with deceptive speed when accusations smelled like fraud. The courtroom was smaller than Sarah imagined. Too small to contain the weight pressing on her chest. Marcus sat across the aisle, suit immaculate, expression carved from polite indignation. He didn't look at her. Not once. David stood when the judge entered. His voice was calm, precise, lethal in its clarity. He dismantled Marcus's claims piece by piece. The trust documents, dated years before the marriage. The prenuptial agreement, signed willingly. The financial trail, losses, unauthorized credit actions, suspicious inquiries. Each fact landed like a measure blow. Marcus's lawyer tried to pivot, framing intent as misunderstanding, recklessness as ambition. The judge wasn't interested. Her gaze hardened as she addressed Marcus directly. "You entered this marriage with a signed agreement," she said. "You contributed no income. You accumulated debt under questionable circumstances. And now you seek entitlement to assets predating the relationship entirely." Marcus swallowed. "On what basis?" The judge continued, voice slicing cleanly. "Do you believe this court should reward that behavior?" Silence. Marcus's lawyer stumbled through legal jargon that collapsed under its own weight. The ruling came swiftly. Motion denied. Divorce to proceed under grounds of financial misconduct. The words echoed in Sarah's ears like distant thunder. Marcus's composure cracked, just slightly, but Robert saw it. The flash of rage. The humiliation barely restrained. The war wasn't over. It was escalating. 2 weeks later, Robert's phone rang again. This time the bank. His voice turned cold as he listened. Someone had attempted access to his safe deposit box using forged power of attorney documents. Security footage confirmed the visitor. Marcus, dressed in a navy suit. Calm, confident, until the bank flagged the fraud. Police intervened within minutes. Sarah sat across from Robert when he told her. Her face went pale. He tried to, she couldn't finish. "To steal," Robert said quietly, directly. Her hand shook. "This never ends, does it?" "It ends now," he replied. Marcus was arrested the same day. Fraud, forgery, federal charges. The news felt unreal, like reading a headline about strangers. Yet the emotional aftermath was immediate. Sarah cried, not from love, not from longing, from the crushing realization of how close she'd come to losing everything. Robert held her as the truth settled, not as a sharp shock this time, but as a heavy understanding. Protection had not been paranoia. It had been necessity. The legal fallout moved quickly. Evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's defense collapsed under documentation he couldn't explain away. 18 months. Federal prison. When the sentence was read, Sarah didn't feel triumph. She felt quiet, a space where fear had been. Later that night, she sat beside Robert in her living room, the house strangely peaceful. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "about what would have happened if you hadn't built all of this. If he'd reached your accounts." Robert met her gaze. "You didn't fall," he said, "because there was a net." Tears filled her eyes again, gentler this time. "Thank you," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "That's what parents do," he said. "We protect, even when you don't know you need it yet." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent life. Inside, something fragile had been reclaimed. Not innocence, not the past, but agency. And as Robert stared into the quiet room, one thought lingered. Some confrontations don't just expose betrayal. They reveal the architecture of love built in anticipation of it. And the question that remained was no longer about Marcus. It was about healing. Could Sarah rebuild trust without losing the strength she'd gained from seeing the truth? The house felt different after the sentencing. Not lighter. Healing never arrives that clean, but quieter in a way that suggested something malignant had finally been cut out. The tension that once hummed beneath every surface had faded into memory, leaving behind a fragile stillness. Sarah moved through her days with the cautious steadiness of someone relearning balance after a fall. She still woke some nights, heart racing, unsure why. But the fear no longer had a face waiting at the foot of her bed. Marcus was gone. not erased. People like him never vanished entirely, but contained. His absence created space. And in that space, something older and deeper began to breathe again. Trust, not in others yet, but in herself. One Saturday afternoon, Robert called her. "Dress warm," he said. "We're going out." She frowned. "Where?" "You'll see." The drive downtown was calm, winter sunlight reflecting off icy sidewalks. Toronto moved around them in its usual rhythm. Streetcars groaning, pedestrians hunched against the cold, life indifferent to personal wars. Sarah watched the city pass and felt an unexpected flutter of curiosity. They parked near the familiar glass facade of a bank she'd visited countless times in her professional life. She glanced at the sign, puzzled. "Why are we at the bank?" she asked. Robert smiled faintly. "Because it's time." The words settled strangely in her chest. Inside, the air was warm and sterile, carrying the quiet authority of institutions built on trust and paperwork. A clerk greeted Robert by name, voice polite and practiced. Within minutes, they were walking down a narrow corridor into the safe deposit vault, a room that felt less like a bank and more like a sanctuary carved from steel. The attendant retrieved a small metal box and handed it to Robert with a nod. "Box 447. Robert carried it to the viewing table. His hands moved with deliberate calm as he inserted the keys and lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of notebooks, worn leather, edges softened by time. Beneath them rested neatly folded documents, sealed envelopes, and a small velvet pouch. Sarah leaned closer. "What is all this?" she whispered. Robert picked up one of the notebooks carefully, like it might crumble under careless touch. "Your mother," he said. The air shifted. Sarah's breath caught. He opened the cover. Catherine's handwriting flowed across the page, elegant, unmistakable. Ink preserved like a voice suspended in time. Sarah's fingers trembled as she took the journal. She began to read. The world narrowed. Her mother's words reached across years, intimate and immediate. Observations about Sarah's childhood, the way she used to hum while concentrating, her stubborn streak, her boundless empathy. Reflections on marriage, on illness, on fear, on love that refused to dim, even in the shadow of death. And then Sarah found the entry. Her voice broke as she read aloud. "I worry about Sarah. She is brilliant, capable, but she believes goodness is universal. One day someone will see her kindness not as strength, but as opportunity. Robert, when I'm gone, protect her. Not just her future, but her heart. Make sure she never loses herself, trying to save someone who doesn't deserve her." Tears blurred the ink. "She knew," Sarah whispered. Robert nodded. His voice was soft. "Your mother saw people clearly. Especially you." Sarah clutched the journal to her chest, grief and gratitude colliding in her ribs. It didn't feel like reading. It felt like being held. Robert slid the documents forward. "The trust," he said. "Everything Catherine left. Insurance, property investments, growth over time." Sarah scanned the figures. The numbers stared back at her, larger than she expected, larger than she wanted process. "I don't need this," she murmured. "I know," Robert said. "That was never the point." She looked at him. "It's protection," he continued. "Options. A safety net built from love, not fear." Sarah exhaled shakily. For the first time, the money didn't feel abstract. It felt intentional, a message from her mother written in assets and foresight. "I want to do something with it," she said quietly. "Something that matters." Robert smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Months later, the scholarship fund was established in Catherine's name at the University of Toronto Medical Program. It wasn't just a donation. It was legacy shaped into opportunity. Each student supported carried forward a piece of Catherine's story: resilience, compassion, determination. At the dedication ceremony, Sarah stood at the podium with her mother's journal tucked safely in her bag. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "My mother believed kindness was strength," she said. "She also believed strength needed protection. This scholarship is both an act of generosity and a promise that potential should never be limited by circumstance." The applause that followed felt warm, grounding. Robert watched from the audience, pride swelling in his chest like a tide. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks, moments when Sarah flinched at unfamiliar charm, when doubt crept in uninvited. But time layered perspective over pain. She dated cautiously, not from fear, but from awareness. She invited Robert for coffee after meeting someone new, not for permission, but for perspective. Their conversations weren't interrogations. They were reflections. "What do you think?" she'd ask. "I think," Robert would reply gently, "you already know." And she usually did. 3 years passed. Sarah turned 40 with a quiet confidence that felt earned. Her career thrived. Her laughter returned. Not the naive laughter of someone untouched by betrayal, but the grounded joy of someone who had seen darkness and chosen light anyway. Marcus's release from prison reached them as distant news. A relocation. A whisper of a new beginning somewhere else. Sarah felt nothing. No anger. No longing. Just distance. One afternoon, she and Robert sat outside a cafe, sunlight warming the table between them. She laughed at something he said, a full, unguarded sound that carried across the street. Robert felt his hand drift to his pocket. Inside was a folded piece of paper, Catherine's words, worn soft from years of quiet reassurance. "The best inheritance we can give Sarah isn't money. It's wisdom, boundaries, and unconditional love." He touched the paper and looked at his daughter, alive, resilient, whole. They had done it, not by shielding her from heartbreak. That was impossible, but by ensuring heartbreak never became devastation. The safe deposit box had never been about wealth. It was architecture, a structure built to hold when trust collapsed, a promise written in foresight. "You will not fall alone." Sarah caught him watching her. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing," he said. "Just proud." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thanks for protecting me," she said softly. Robert shook his head. "You protected yourself," he replied. "I just made sure the ground was solid." She nodded, understanding, settling deeper than words. The city buzzed around them, indifferent, alive, full of stories unfolding in every direction. But in that small pocket of sunlight, father and daughter sat wrapped in something rare. Love that had anticipated danger, prepared for it, and endured. And as Sarah leaned back, eyes bright with a future she trusted again, a final realization settled between them. Quiet, certain, unshakable. Real wealth isn't measured in accounts or property. It's measured in the ability to protect the people you love.